Yes. Yeah, we didn't even plan this to coordinate it, but here we are, so we'll take it. The big question is, are we both wearing jeans or is one of us in pajama pants? No one will really know, right? No, not going there, not going there. I'm with you. Yeah. Mm, mhm. Yeah, correct. Mhm. No, I really don't. I think it's a very obvious reference, for anyone who of a particular age or that their parents have forced them, like, I have to my children to listen to 80s music. My kids, they grabbed it immediately. It's because they're forced, under the rule, my car, my music sort of scenario. But I do want people to know we're taking the sermons pretty serious, but we're also just trying to have a little bit of fun while we're online. So I'll even take suggestions for 80 songs that must be worked in at some point at the beginning of the message. So if you are watching live right now, which I don't know, there may be three people or 20, I don't
Yeah,
know. But if you're watching live right now and you hear this and you have a reference you want me to work in, we'll see what we can do.
yeah. And if the crowd doesn't, or if the audience doesn't come up with one, I think I've got a stumper for him this weekend too as well.
Yes,
So
he probably does.
we've just been kind of having fun with that. It's gives us something to on the production side look forward to every weekend. So
Yeah, exactly.
it's kind of a fun thing. So at the beginning of Sunday's message, you talked about how we are to live life differently
Mhm.
given these unprecedented times. What would you say is the biggest challenge to how you do life?
That's a good question. I actually asked this on my Facebook page from a small level. I think obviously, with there's a lot of financial challenges right now in people's lives and emotional challenges with all of this. But I think there's small things, and for me, it's routine. I'm a person of routine, Jim. I know you're a person of routine. Some people out
Yeah.
there as well. And even today is my big sermon prep day. And I'm attempting to take a look at what we're going to talk about this coming Sunday, Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 to 3. And I'm doing it at the same time as both my kids are trying to get their schoolwork done and things aren't working and they're coming in and coming out. And my wife's working at her job at the high school. And I think for me, I just realized how dependent I had become on life working a certain way. And then when it's not working that way, I've discovered how challenging it is for me. And frankly, there's probably a
Yeah.
spiritual thing there too that we can talk about.
Yeah. So, what would you say is your biggest challenge in terms of your relationship with God?
Yeah, I think in that too. Again, sometimes it's about routine. For me, I have certain places in the week and places in my day where I spend time with God. Those have all been kind of switched up, and I think I'm not alone in that. I think, but also this unique COVID-19 thing has brought out some things in my life that I don't know how else they would have been brought out. I mean, number one, I think one of the things that's brought out in my life is how much I don't like, and I'll talk about this in some ways on Sunday, to feel dependent. I like to be independent, right? But the truth is, I've got a really good father in God that I should be able to trust in the midst of whatever it might be. And truth be told, I thought I'd made a whole lot more progress on some of these areas than I really had. And I think I'm not alone there. This COVID-19 scenario is an example of God using something difficult and challenging and bad, like this virus, to bring out something good, make us more like Jesus. Romans chapter 8, verse 39, conform us to the image, God working all things together, verse 38. So the COVID-19 he didn't bring, but I think he's definitely in my life using it to bring me more like Jesus in some ways.
Cool. So on Sunday we talked a little bit about John chapter 1 and kind of setting up why we care about Jesus in terms of why if what he says is in Matthew 5, what we're going to talk about this weekend is important,
Hmm.
then let's set up why uh, this person of Jesus was important. So most of us, I don't think, have a hard time thinking about God as something as God as an entity that has always been.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's such a challenging thought to think about Jesus in that same context as Jesus having been from the beginning in terms of an
Mhm.
agent of creation? Uh, why is that such a challenging thought?
Well, I think it's because Jesus took on the form of human flesh, right? Yeah, he was fully man and fully God. And that's a whole doctrine that's permeated all throughout Scripture. And when we see his fully man side, the natural tendency I think that all of us have is make a comparative analysis to ourselves, right? And when we see him or we read about him that way, there's very much his humanity, but his deity, which was completely there in the personhood of Jesus Christ as well. He's been there since the beginning. And for me, I think that's probably one of the bigger challenges of why that is for so. And that's why we also have to remind ourselves of who Jesus was, that he's fully deity, because him being fully deity means, again, everything in every way that he told us on how to live is divine revelation. It is good for us, even if it doesn't seem like it might be good from us from our perspective. It is. And I think for me, that would be the challenge.
Gotcha. So at the end of the message on Sunday, you mentioned a question,
Mhm.
and the question was, "Where am I struggling to live life differently?" And then you gave us three different problems. Where would you say that you're struggling the most to live life differently right now?
You know, I think, and this sounds funny that I'll say this, I think it depends on what day you catch me. And I don't mean that to be a cop out question. I think, number one, there's a whole lot of areas of all of our lives that could be conformed more to look like Jesus. And I also think that there are days in my life where, I am more selfless than I normally am. And then there are days where I'm very selfish. That tends to be probably the one that comes more than the other two I talked about on Sunday a little bit. But it really does just depend. So today, um, I may have done better at being selfless than I was yesterday. But if I'm also being honest, I knew that you were going to ask me this question today, right? And I think there's some accountability in that, right? Knowing
Mhm.
whether it's accountability that's happening right now in video and people are watching it and they know you're the pastor and they're going to think about this, or the type of accountability that has, between two people or four people in a smaller group that says, "Hey, how are you doing?" And so it's a little bit of a plug, I guess, at the same time to say, all of us should have some level of interaction with people who are following after Jesus that can ask us these tough questions and to help us stay accountable in times maybe that normally or otherwise we wouldn't.
Yeah, and I would say a lot of us would feel like right now is an easy time to not necessarily be all that accountable because some of us haven't left the house in weeks. And
Yeah.
so if you haven't left the house in weeks and the only people that you see every day are your family, then it's a little bit easier to kind of slide by on some of those things. So
Yeah. So there, I think we have to be intentional in that way. Um, what are we doing to put in our calendars, again, structure to meet with people, just like we're doing right now, online or some other ways, and know that, frankly, in most cases, we don't have reasons not to meet now. We have a different amount of time that we can use than we normally do, I think, in this culture this time. So take
yeah.
advantage of it.
Yeah, and before we jump to our last question, we'll have you give us a little preview of week 2 of the Unprecedented series. Just a little plug on in terms of that. We'd love for you to join us Wednesday night for a Wednesday
Mhm.
night live teaching, going deeper with Pastor Chris on Wednesday night. And so, if you're not in a group, we would love for you to jump into a group this Wednesday night. We will stream that at 7 o'clock on Wednesday night, and then you can, if you don't have a group, jump into a Zoom group immediately after that. So if you're not connected, we'd love to see you get connected in that way. So, give us a little preview of week 2 of Unprecedented before we sign off for today.
Well, Jesus was an ancient day, let's just say celebrity, right? Today, people are tracked down by the paparazzi, all that. People want to know what certain people are doing in our culture, and we can follow them online, tabloids, TV, whatever we want to do. Well, Jesus was that for differing reasons, obviously, than a lot of people are today. So he was followed everywhere. And a lot of people followed him for the healings that he did, for the miracles that he performed, and they wanted to see what was the next big thing, but they stayed to hear him speak from time to time and teach. And when we get to Matthew chapter 5 this week, it's going to be the beginning of his Sermon on the Mount, the most famous sermon that Jesus ever spoke, Matthew chapter 5 through chapter 7. It's where it's recorded. And the vast majority of chapter 5 is how we live in relationship to other people and how that puts us in better relationship with God. And so we're really going to kind of focus on that. And Jesus is going to say some things that, frankly, I think a lot of people who would have been hearing it in the original audience sitting on that mountainside 2,000 years ago would have been like, oh boy, I'm not so sure. It says in chapter 7, they were astounded by his teaching, both how difficult or challenging it was and how deep and profound it was. And I think in the same way, we will be too, because he leads with something that I don't think that most people, I know I've never started a sermon this way. It says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. Tune in on Sunday. We'll talk about what it really means to be poor in spirit compared to what we might think it means. But that's key. We're going to just, get through one verse. So we'll see how well we do after that.
That will be great. So plan on joining us Sunday morning at 10 o'clock right here, wherever you stream things on Facebook, YouTube, our website, or the Roku device. And
Yeah.
you can jump into week 2 with us. So we look forward to seeing you this weekend if we don't see you before. So,
Yeah.
Hey, have a great day.
Happy Checker Shirt Day.
That's right. Go put on your
That's
checkered
what we're
shirt.
going to call Tuesday now because we don't have any other thing to call it, right? So,
Indeed. Have a great
all
day,
right.
everyone.
Bye.